3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Welcome to the System and Soul Podcast, a place for founders and entrepreneurs to discover breakthrough in their business. I'm Benj Miller, fellow founder, business coach, and your host. This is your place to gain clarity and control as you lead through the challenges you face every day in your business. Running a business is just hard, so we're bringing you the conversations with people who are figuring it out, have figured it out, to help you find breakthrough. Welcome to the System and Soul Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Sometimes I get to interview some friends, and sometimes I get to interview some people that just blow me away that I get to have a conversation with them. And today is one of those days. I would put him in the legend category, which is reserved for very few. He is the author and co-author of multiple books. I think 8 was the last count. I could be wrong behind on that. And the co-founder of Level C, but best known as one of the greatest minds in brand thinking ever. And as a student of his and starting my career in that space, super honored to have you here. Everybody, Marty Neumeier.
Thank you, Benj. Glad to be here.
So cool. So cool. So I'm going to put you through the same rigors as I do everybody else. So you got to start us off with the weird, crazy, interesting, little known fact about you that we cannot Google.
I don't think you can Google it. Who knows, though? Well, hardly anybody knows that I tried out for the Monkees.
The band, the Monkees.
Yeah, the fake band, the Monkees.
Yes.
Back in late 60s, I would say, 68, 69. While I was at art school, I was torn between the thing I had been planning to do my whole life, which was to be a commercial artist, because that's what they called it, and being in a band, because I loved music and writing music, and I was awful, really. I mean, by today's standards, but in those days, I could get by. But anyway, I tried out for the Monkees, and then there was about 200 people in line with their guitars around Desilu Studios, waiting for their turn. I had no idea what it was about. Someone said, "You got to get down there tonight because they're auditioning people who write songs and play an instrument." So I went down, got my turn in a little room with no windows and 3 people sitting behind a table. They asked me to play a song. I got about halfway through. They said, "Okay, that's good. Give us another one." Played another song, and they said, "Okay, we'll let you know." And then nothing. So this just what you'd expect from an audition. And so I just figured, okay, the whole thing is silly. I'm going to be a designer, so what am I doing here? So and I just, turned my attention to design. And it was about 30 years later, I was 50 something, early 50s. And I got a call from a producer who said, "Hey, we're doing a documentary on the Monkees." And I said, "You're kidding. Why?" He says, "Well, it's really interesting, all these songwriters, and there's a lot of interesting stuff behind it. And we found your name on a short list of possible choices for one of the roles." And I said, "Short list, really?" And I said, "How short?" And he goes, "Well, you're the second one. You were the next in line." I said, "For what role?" They said, "Peter Tork got that part." And wow, it's like that. Something like that happens. You think I was that close to being a whole different person.
Yeah.
So they wanted me to be in the documentary, and I said, "Yeah, sure." And they said, "Can you get down here tomorrow night?" I said, "Down where?" And they go, "LA, in the studio." I said, "Well, I'm in San Francisco." They said, "Never mind." They didn't have the budget to get me down to LA. So it wasn't like a huge thing, but the learning that you were close to having a completely different life was an interesting thing. So now you know.
Well, and I mean, what a great life lesson, because that would have been super cool. And I'm sure it was disappointing to watch Monkees on TV and not be in it. But
No. It was not, because I didn't
no.
even have any expectations for it. I thought it was kind of a silly show. It was later that I realized that these songs, well, their idea was that the performers would be playing their own music and writing the songs as much as possible.
Yeah.
But their backup plan was, well, we're going to get pros to do this, right?
Sure.
Studio musicians, actual writers. And it's too bad, because I would have been able to write a whole bunch of songs.
Yeah.
But I only found out that later. And as it turns out, a lot of those Monkee songs were written by the top songwriters of the time. Neil Diamond, Carole King.
Oh, wow.
Just like on and on. You just never knew who they were. Nobody cared, because it was the Monkees.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
Well, I'm glad you
interesting
took the
blip.
path that you took, and
I
it
am
led you
too.
to where you are. So you gave me the top 3 things that are on your mind, and I'm just going to kind of facilitate walking us through these, but I don't know if I've ever been more intrigued. And I'm fascinated with just where your mind is right now. I just finished, by the way, little plug here. I just finished this one, The 46 Rules of Genius. Is that pretty new? It was new to me.
It's a re-release because it got caught up in my publisher went out of business without telling anybody. They kind of just quietly closed the door and didn't put any effort into promoting it. So I got the rights back, and so I'm re-releasing it.
Okay.
And that one is a kind of a quick start guide to this much more heavy duty one, meta skills.
Yeah.
Meta skills is my opus. If you want to know the deep things I'm thinking, they're all in here. And I actually refer to this a lot in everything I do from now on. I'm going back there and finding so many things that I turned up in research that are turning out to be really important. So
yeah,
I'm sure the things we're going to talk about today have their seeds in that book, Meta Skills.
Yeah. Well, that's great to know, because you say that's where, your deep thoughts are, but everything that I encounter from you feels like a deep thought. Maybe it's normal for you, but you are just one of these brilliant, deep thinkers. And I appreciate that. I mentioned it to you earlier. In System and Soul, we give away ZAG to all of our coaches and a lot of our customers. And so that's been a very helpful tool for a long time. Love that. And this book felt like, every once in a while you find something that articulates some of the things that you do or some of the things you think. And it just is so helpful to have some language wrapped around it. And that's and as well as some fresh thoughts in there. That was a really fun sit down. And I think I read the whole thing in one sitting. I couldn't put it down. So great book. Well, but here are the top 3 things that Marty is wrestling with, questioning, spending his brain power thinking on right now. The definition of growth when growth becomes the enemy, the role of business in a divided society, and the meaning of brands when tribal beliefs become a substitute for truth. So if you didn't think we were going deep, now you know that's where we're going. The definition of growth when growth becomes the enemy. What is that about for you?
Have you noticed lately a lot of people have growth in their titles, like it's a thing? Right.
Growth officer.
Growth hacking, growth this, growth that.
Yeah,
and it's as if we can't even question the idea of growth. Of course you have to have growth. And so, I mean, it's, everything alive grows, right? It grows until it dies, basically. So I think I started to think about, well, wait a minute. We're entering a period where we're going to be in deep trouble, and we're already in deep trouble. We're running out of resources. We've depleted the world's resources. Worse, we've turned the resources into things we don't know what to do with, that are killing life all over the planet, and it has ripple effects going on and on. And I think this is going to be a game changer for society. I can't see how we can get out of this. And so I started thinking, well, how do we get into it? Maybe just back out would be the best way. So how do we get into it? Well, we had the industrial age, which was, came from It started way back in the agricultural age when we made tools, and we were able then to have farms, and then we were able to produce more than we could eat. And so everything was growth, growth, growth. And then we hit the industrial age, and then we started using lots of resources to make machinery and stuff like that. And so, and now plastic bags,
Right.
So we got a huge problem to deal with. And how do we, growth is what got us into this. It's like this never ending growth, because if you're always growing, there's always more money for everybody. The thing is, on the back end, there's fewer and fewer resources.
Yeah.
So at some point, we're going to wake up, I think, and say, ooh, growth is killing us. So now what do we do? What do you do if growth isn't your God in business? And I'm not going to give you the answer because I don't have one. This is baffling, because somehow we have to figure out a different way to live going forward. And there's no model for it, because we've been doing this growth thing for 10,000 years. We don't have any models for not growing.
Yes.
So we're going to have to figure this out. And the way to figure out anything new is through design. You have to use design. You have to decide what your goal is, and then you have to figure it out. So design is, as a general way of thinking, I think is going to be a big deal. Not just in branding,
yes,
in business, in technology, in building a society, in making decisions about what we do together going forward, if we even can make decisions together. There's quite a bit of doubt right now that humans are capable of cooperating on a large scale.
That probably leads to your second point. But I'm reminded of a few people that I knew that when COVID hit, they decided they were going to check out and move to a cabin in the woods and live off the land and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's probably what that reversal would look like. But you're right. There's the majority of people are not willing to make that sacrifice. Yeah.
Well, you can be a survivalist, but that's part of that's a continuation of the same track that we've been on, which is the track towards sufficiency and individuality. It's a real big American trait. Is I'm an individual. I don't need any people. I think that's actually, we're a part of the wrong direction. I think, I'm in Mexico right now. I moved to Mexico. And one of the things that surprised me about living here is that there's not a lot of self-service. And we don't even think about it in the US. Like in the US, we're just used to pumping our own gas, maybe checking out our own groceries. Everything you can do yourself, do your own banking. And this is framed as a good thing, right? Oh, now you have control over your life. Right. Well, it's also making you more isolated from humans. And we know now that being around humans is what keeps us happy. And so we're becoming less and less happy as we become more isolated through technology. And it's sad what's happening to teenage kids and stuff through social media and stuff, the suicides and just the incredible loneliness. It's hard enough being a teenager. But, so you can think of all these things are kind of a piece. We're going down the wrong track, but it's the same track we've been on for a long time. And so how do we get out of that? I don't think going back to, more primitive times is the answer, although there might be some inspiration there. I think we're just going to have to move on to doing healthier things. And that's going to mean a lot of change. It's going to mean our idea of capitalism is going to have to change. I don't think it's going away. I think there'll be business because it's just so human to do business and trade things.
Yeah.
But the idea of capitalism, which is really about making money from money, that's what that's about. I don't have to do any work. I can just put money over here on the red square, and maybe I'll get lucky and win the jackpot. That isn't really helping to contribute anything to society. So that's just another way of extracting wealth from other people's work. So we have to think about all that, and you can see the results of not thinking about that. I mean, things are not good in the world right now. So I think that's just part of what we have to figure out, and I hope we can figure out. And I'm thinking about that all the time, is And so what are the answers to these? Where do you even begin to reverse 10,000 years of human evolution, or not reverse it, but just maybe jump to the next level?
I wonder if you said something in there that made me think maybe it's even reframing what growth looks like or what it means, and you used the word healthy in there. Like, what if we were trying to grow in health, and health was some measure of everything that we were trying to design along the way.
Or happiness. Like, some people are realizing that that's the goal of all this, is to have a healthy, happy life. So why don't we focus on that first and then work backwards?
I love that.
So, this is a lot to take on. And
this is a total downer, Marty.
I think it's actually super optimistic, because the amount of exciting work that would be involved in changing something that radically. I mean, there'd be work for everybody. Excitement for everybody, room for you to express your personality in a million ways. It's the end of stagnation. I mean, we're just getting to this very stagnant point where it's just, a few people are really rich and everybody else is struggling, and they're going to just keep struggling more and more all the time unless we do something. So I think these are the things, these are the interesting challenges of our time.
Well, I appreciate the beauty of your optimism. It probably is highly correlated to, making progress in this direction is probably tied to our ability to work together in unity. And the second thing on your list was the role of business in a divided society.
Yeah, because right now I think business, well, it's really interesting what's happening. Businesses starting to realize that customers are important, that it's not just about them and their
You've been telling them that for 30 years.
Yeah. So finally, maybe they're realizing the same thing that I saw, is customers are everything. And if you want customers, you need to make their lives better. And so business, a lot of companies are kind of taken together, are a bright spot in the situation. They're actually doing the right thing. They're trying to be fair, just, centered on people instead of just, investors but government's way behind the curve, not getting it, not in the lead. And so, and they're, of course, just like always, there are businesses that are super greedy and just will make money any way they can and justify that by saying, well, we're doing the right thing for our shareholders.
There is a famous, I live in Atlanta. There's a famous pastor here who opened the state Senate and spoke to the House or the Senate. I'm not sure which, but he got pretty fired up. And at some point he said something to the effect of, if you care more about your job than the people you're serving, you're in the wrong business. And it was very bold. It was very beautiful, but it's the same thing as what you're talking about. It's the customers have to come before self-preservation.
And, there's so much success to be had in that direction if you could just change your way of thinking. But whenever companies do that and they think about the customer first, they do really well. Thinking about companies like Procter & Gamble, huge company, and internally they're just like striving and struggling to get an extra 0.5% of sales over the year, like tiny amounts. It's just all about that. Their whole lives are just about these little advantages. And then along comes a company like Method that makes soap that's good for the environment, or that's their claim. At first they can't even get onto the shelves because the big companies have pressure the retailers not to take any space away from them on the shelf.
Right.
So the retailers are going, yeah, but people want these kinds of products. Yeah, but if you want us to be on your shelf, if you want Tide on your shelf, you better pay attention to us. That's kind of the underlying meaning of that. So what they did is they bought space at the end of aisles. They bought their own section like the method section, and that's how they got a foothold. And this stuff sold like crazy, and they were like hugely successful. And so here you have Procter and Gamble, they're fighting over tiny percentage points, and this little company comes in and just steals a whole bunch of business from them. So it's all about positioning. So big companies can win, small companies can win. Everybody has a way to win, but you have to think strategically about that. And I think companies that think about what customers want and are actively trying to understand how they can make their customers' lives better, not just separate them from their money.
Yeah,
those are the ones that get a really good start in the world and have a chance to actually grow.
Yeah.
Right. But in a way that's helpful to people.
Yeah. And when you care about your customer, then your product is something that you serve them with, not sell them on. Right.
That's right.
And it changes
exactly.
everything.
Changes everything.
So what is so let me bring us back to the question here. The role of business in a divided society. I think it's easy to see the division. What can we as business leaders do?
I think the answer for me is clear. It's just what we were talking about. Don't put shareholders first. Don't put your own stuff first. Put that last. Put customers first. Maybe employees second. At the end of the line, you get the investors who get the residual, profits from doing a good job. From creating a long-term company, a viable company, and they'll do really well. But when shareholders start trying to drive the company and saying me first, CEOs have to stand up to them, and that's very difficult.
Yeah.
So that has to change. And I think the way it changes is customers have a voice and they use it. They just say, I'm not going to get involved with your company because I don't like you. I don't trust you, So getting trust is, the trust of your tribe, your brand tribe, super important, very powerful.
There's one element, I'm sure you've thought about this, but this pains me, is that, good companies become big, and then big companies, specifically those that go public, they went from making this big bet on their customer, their product, whatever they were doing, and it worked. But now they're forced into the bets of quarterly reporting. How are we going to get the earnings per share this quarter to be more than they were last quarter? Right. And
so what
you
happens,
lose long-term thinking when you do that.
You do. You're all about the next quarter. Or your mind is split long-term and short-term. And often there's nobody's responsible for the long-term. That's why you need what I call a CBO, Chief Brand Officer. That's Chief Brand Officer is about growing the tribe and keeping the tribe happy over the long term without a lot of pressure to make the short term work. That's where marketing comes in. Marketing can do that really well.
Right.
Keep the wheels turning. But it's a big job. Thinking strategically all the time about your customers instead of about your company. So we need that. Steve Jobs that was what he did. He was a chief brand officer with a different title. But he wasn't, in there talking with shareholders and trying to, convince them of anything. He was just out there making the best products that he could imagine, and then driving his employees to think about customers really intensely and to make them really happy and do just a beautiful job on everything they did. And not a nice person to work with, a very difficult person, but he's the customer's best friend,
Well said. So I hate to this feels like putting you on the spot, but are there brands that you see that are doing this well right now?
I see flashes all the time of good things, but putting it all together so that you're good in every area, I'm not seeing a lot of that. There have been companies that did that for a while. IBM had a really good run for 20 or 30 years. Apple, of course, probably still the best, but seems to be crumbling a little at the edge without Steve in the game. And they're starting to cut corners on design. There's a lot of, seems to me, infighting about design. I think Johnny Ives got stripped of his power, and maybe for good reason. Maybe he did the design part really well, but couldn't fill in. He couldn't connect it to the business as well as they would have wanted, or he couldn't make the case for it.
Right.
But so he got kind of sidelined, and that's not a good sign. But the thing is, Apple's got so much momentum. It's, all they have to do is keep that going, and they'll do pretty well. There's who else? I really see more problems than I see great companies right now, and I think that's part of the pressure we're all under to keep performing in an age where it's getting more difficult to do well, right? Without having the tools maybe to understand what's going to happen in the future and how to address that. So, that's what I spend my time thinking about, and trying to share that with people for what it's worth.
I love that. That's a great life mission. Let's hit this third one before we run out of time. The meaning of brands when tribal belief becomes a substitute for truth.
Yeah. Well, we see that everywhere, don't we? People joining a tribe so that they don't have to think or come up with ideas that may not resonate with what their friends think. So you shop for a tribe, basically, or fall into a tribe, and then you believe everything that tribe is saying without pushing back. So there's not a lot of once you join a tribe, it's hard to get out. It's like a cult, and we're all kind of, we fall into those kinds of things really easily. And so that's why brands are successful. They allow you not to think so much when you're making a purchase. So, there are a lot of products you don't want to think about it at all, right? It's just like, oh, which laundry soap do I buy? Oh, Tide. Yeah, that's supposed to be good. Good. Okay, I'll just be a Tide person from now on until further notice. And what happens is that becomes your brand, just because you don't want, in this case, you don't want to think about it. And you'll just use that brand forever unless something changes, like you get introduced to another one, or they don't have that brand where you're living, so you can't buy it. And of course, Tide is available anywhere. Even here in Mexico, they've got Tide, plus a few knockoffs that look just like it. So what happens when everything just turns into belief? Like, it's just this sort of blind trust that you have. Then you've got kind of a stagnation where people won't move at all. They just have their brands and they won't change, and it just becomes part of the larger problem of people not questioning things, not doing the hard work of thinking, not wanting to fit in with their tribe. That's what branding is based on. So I'm not totally against it, but I also think if you're playing that game where you're building a tribe, you also have to do something really good for the tribe.
Yes.
You can't just extract money from them until they're used up.
Right.
Which is how a lot of companies think about it. They just don't think long term. They don't think beyond their own walls.
Yep. You gave a great example, and it's escaping me right now. It was in a talk you gave 2 or 3 years ago. But you gave a great example of a customer that did really well. Oh, I know what it was. It was your Blockbuster example about how the fees became their addiction. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. That's a good example. So Blockbuster, as soon as DVDs, or were they the cassettes?
The VHS
cassettes became a thing that you could buy. Then they started selling them, mostly renting them. But it's expensive to buy all those cassettes. So what they did is they say, okay, we need those back. Don't just take those and keep them for weeks and weeks. You got to bring them back in 3 days. And it's okay if you don't, but it's going to be $1 a day when you return them. And the original idea was we'll get the stuff back, right? But that's not what happened. People kept them anyway and then paid the fees, feeling guilty the whole time, feeling like a slob, like they don't have their lives together, and spending a lot of money. And after a while, those late fees became 1/3 of their revenues.
Oh, wow. And
So rather than say, we got to help these customers out, maybe we got to buy more stock, or we got to help them some way because we're just bleeding them. And so that just went on until Netflix came along and said, no late fees, you just keep them as long as you want, but until you return them, you can't get the next ones. And we'll just mail them to you. And of course, they're DVDs, so they're light and easy to mail. So they just took advantage of that. It was very clever and just wiped out Blockbuster overnight. And you had like thousands of stores just shuttered like within a month or something like that. It was not a month, but it was a few months. And it just shows you how you can get addicted to just extracting money from your customers without making them better people.
Yeah. I mean, Netflix is always like, comes up in the innovation, Blockbuster versus Netflix, the innovation conversation, but I had never heard it related to how you serve your customer, and the fact that Blockbuster was, this is maybe too bold of a word, abusive to their customer in a way that we had become numb to. And so that was a wonderful.
Well, I think business strategists, whenever they're making a change or inventing a new category or a new product, they should ask themselves the very simple question, which is, and just keep asking it, what do we want our customers to become?
Wow. What a great question. I'm going to end on that, Marty. Respect your time and get you out of here on time. Thank you so much for blessing our community and our listener with your voice and your thoughts, and just really appreciate you and your work. We'll make sure that everybody has access to, we'll just link them to your website if that's okay. All the books are on there, the talks,
that's the best place.
The workshops.
MartyNeumeier.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Benj. My pleasure. See you soon.